Welcome back everybody, I'm Nick930, and last week, I was invited out to Sony Interactive Entertainment's headquarters in San Mateo, where I was given a unique opportunity to go hands-on with Sony's upcoming PlayStation 5 Pro. There, I was able to see the console in person, play a bunch of games that utilize the system's upgraded tech, and was even able to talk to several developers behind today's biggest games, and how the PlayStation 5 Pro is set to benefit those experiences. And today, I want to share my experience with you, and give you a better sense of what you can expect when the PlayStation 5 Pro releases this November 7th. Now, before we get started, I do want to thank PlayStation for inviting me to this event and paying for my last-minute travel accommodations. Though I do want to stress that this is not a sponsored video, and all opinions on what I experienced during my hands-on time with the PS5 Pro are my own. What's more, this is only a preview, and I will provide a more technical comparison of the PS5 Pro closer to release for my final review. Alright, so let's kick this preview off by talking about the product itself. This is the PlayStation 5 Pro. As you can see, it's pretty similar to the previous designs for the PlayStation 5, bearing the most resemblance to the more recent PS5 Slim Digital Edition. That being said, it is a little bit bigger, roughly the same height as the original launch PlayStation 5. It also sports a new accordion-style central cut between the two plates on either side. And for those wondering, those plates should be compatible between the plates available on the newer digital-only PS5 units, though I'll update the pinned comment below when I hear back to confirm this. Now, I couldn't get any physical hands-on with the hardware itself to test things like weight or open it up and see the internal hardware, but I was able to at least look at the unit from all sides and check out some of the inputs and ports on it. And it's pretty much the same as previous PlayStation 5 models, with an AC port on the rear panel, 2 USBs, Ethernet port, and HDMI out. Meanwhile, the front panel has a clickable power button and 2 USB-C ports. Aside from that sleek vented pattern in the center, it's essentially the same thing that we're all familiar with. The one exception, though, is the lack of a built-in 4K Blu-ray disc drive. For me, this is a big downside to this console, as I'm big into physical game preservation. And without a disc drive, I'm effectively losing access to a large number of not just PS5 games, but my PS4 collection as well. Fortunately, there is an option to upgrade and add a disc drive attachment, the same one currently available for the PlayStation 5 Digital, but it won't be included in the package, and will set you back an additional $79.99 to buy it separately. Alongside this, the PlayStation 5 Pro also doesn't come equipped with this vertical stand either, adding an additional $29.99 to your cost if you were to replicate the form factor of a standard launch edition PlayStation 5. All that being said, the PS5 Pro does also see an increase to its storage capacity, with its internal M.2 SSD being doubled to nearly 2 terabytes, which is an absolute must considering the size of most games today. Also, bear in mind that a 1 terabyte M.2 expansion for the PlayStation 5 currently often lists at around $120, which helps to explain at least some of that extra cost. Which brings us to the PlayStation 5 Pro's most contentious issue, its price. As you've probably already heard, the PlayStation 5 Pro will be launching at a starting price of $69.99, a 40% increase over the initial price of the PlayStation 5 back in 2020. Yes, general prices have gone up significantly over the course of the past 4 years, so the price of the original PlayStation 5 today would realistically be closer to $600 if we used a CPI calculation. But when you consider the lack of a built-in disc drive and the vertical stand, you're still spending quite a bit for this new hardware. Again, that increased storage does help to offset the price a bit, but I feel like I would have rather had the disc drive with the option to extend the internal storage, rather than the other way around. So, with that elephant in the room accounted for, what are you actually getting with the PlayStation 5 Pro? Well, based on my discussions with several different development studios this past week, along with some hands-on time playing through many of PlayStation 5's biggest games, the most immediate benefit of the PlayStation 5 Pro is its widely adopted PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR for short. As you can probably already guess, this is PlayStation's response to things like Nvidia's DLSS AI-based super sampling. that can upscale the resolution of a game to 4K without sacrificing as much performance as you'd expect with traditional native resolutions. This means games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Gran Turismo 7, The Last of Us Part 2, and most new games set to release in the future will all aim to take advantage of this new tech to push higher fidelity images without sacrificing that coveted 60 FPS. On top of PSSR, the PS5 Pro also sports some new baseline internal upgrades as well, primarily this new graphics chip that boasts a 67% boost to compute units and a 28% increase to RAM speed, for an estimated 45% increase in overall rendering speeds. The CPU hasn't seen quite as big of an improvement, but it is clocked at a higher frequency of 3.8 GHz, which is roughly 10% faster than what's available on the base PlayStation 5. According to the devs I spoke to, most of the upgrades that they were able to make to their software were strongly aligned with the extra headroom afforded to them by the GPU, with the PSSR technology being a game changer for rendering games at a higher resolution without having to sacrifice their performance. The PS5 Pro also aims to improve the rendering speed of ray tracing effects as well, with updates that allow the hardware to calculate rays at more than double the speed of the base PS5. Though, across the several demos that I played, this feature wasn't given quite as much of the spotlight, and seemed limited to only a handful of games like Gran Turismo 7, Spider-Man 2, and Hogwarts Legacy. With those titles, I was impressed to find new implementation of ray tracing features with the PS5 Pro, especially Gran Turismo 7, that will feature in-game ray-traced reflections against the bodies of cars, rather than being limited to the replay mode like before. Hogwarts Legacy will also implement its ray-traced shadow rendering on PS5 Pro, a feature that was previously limited to the PC release and wasn't included with the base PS5. In general, the benefits of the PlayStation 5 Pro will vary a bit depending on the game that you're playing. At this event, I was given the chance to freely explore a large room filled with various demo stations, each accompanied by a representative from that studio, and I was able to get a detailed breakdown of each game and what the PlayStation 5 Pro's improved hardware enabled them to achieve. The first game that I sat down and tried was one of PlayStation 5's most visually impressive titles, Gran Turismo 7. This particular demo was unique from the other demos on the showroom floor, as it was running on an 8K display. And remarkably, there was an actual option to kick the game up to an 8K resolution on the PS5 Pro running at 60 FPS, which it seemed to manage quite well, with no noticeable dips in the frame rate, at least none that I could discern just eyeballing it. The mode does come with a few caveats, in that it is being upscaled using the PSSR AI solution, and there was at least some very minor artifacts in rare instances, mainly for a single decorative asset that I noticed off of the track. It also won't utilize the improved ray-traced reflections that I mentioned earlier, but still, 8K at 60 FPS is impressive to see nonetheless, and not something that I expected to see at all. Considering I don't own an 8K TV myself, and I doubt very many of you have considered buying one yet either, this option doesn't necessarily persuade me one way or the other. But I was still impressed by the 4K ray-traced mode, that lets you finally race around at 60 FPS with real-time ray-traced reflections along the sides of vehicles. Following my time with Gran Turismo, I tried out a few other major first-party PlayStation 5 titles, including Demon's Souls, The Last of Us Part 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and Marvel's Spider-Man 2, all of which approach the improved hardware in more or less the same way. In nearly every discussion I had with developers, I was told the biggest benefit was the added headroom afforded to them by the implementation of PSSR. Ratchet & Clank was particularly interesting, because I was shown a side-by-side of the base PS5 running in performance mode alongside the PS5 Pro version, and I could already see the advantages of this newer PSSR tech compared to the old temporal injection Insomniac had been using before. The blurry artifacting seen on things like the confetti flying around during the opening parade sequence, for example, is now almost entirely cleaned up on the PS5 Pro, as were some of the aliased edges of certain background objects and those distant NPCs in the crowd. Moving over to Insomniac's other title on display, Spider-Man 2, we get a slightly different story. In this instance, we're getting the fidelity mode from the base PS5, but at double the frame rate. So no discernible sacrifices to image quality at all. In fact, PSSR even does a better job than the previous upscaling solutions at distant details like text on billboards and ray trace reflections that previously fell apart at a distance. I found this to become a pattern as I explored other titles, with PSSR resolving the smaller details with much more clarity, including Naughty Dog's The Last of Us Part 2, where a small building on the distant hillside could finally be identified. PSSR had an even greater benefit to the Crew Motorfest, as several distant objects and text could now be rendered with a higher accuracy, providing a much sharper image overall. The only demo that seemed to not rely on PSSR seemed to be Guerrilla Games' Horizon Forbidden West. According to the spokesperson at the booth, the target for this title's PS5 improvements was on image stability, cleaning up any issues in the presentation using the brute force of the PlayStation 5's more powerful specs, and providing a full native 4K resolution at a stable 60 FPS. Having already played this game on the PC earlier this year, I was already fairly used to what this game could look like, so I can't say I was necessarily blown away. But as promised, the presentation and performance was rock solid here, with no drops in frames during combat, no environmental pop-in, or any other downsides to the visual fidelity. In fact, there were a few small improvements as well, independent from the higher quality sliders on PC. Shadow filtering for character hair and skin, for example, has been improved. Depth of field effects are higher quality. The mip-map distance are bumped out further, and can be resolved at a greater distance. And the distance that vegetation animates, like trees and grass, has been increased as well, making an already drop-dead gorgeous game look even better on PlayStation's latest console. But these are all mostly first-party titles. How about third-party? Well, we had Final Fantasy VII on the showroom floor, and it was another game that greatly benefits from PS5 Pro's updates. Like many of the first-party games mentioned before, Rebirth leans heavily into PSSR utilization, allowing for essentially a 60 FPS fidelity mode. Of all these titles, performance mode in Rebirth on the current base PS5 is pretty hard to look at, as it runs at a much lower resolution and looks like a blurry mess in my opinion. But with PS5 Pro using the new versatility mode, Rebirth finally looks and plays great at the same time, and even improves the draw distance on some of those distant objects, giving the game the visual fidelity that it always deserved. Performance at 60 FPS was a little shaky here, with what felt like minor dips at times. But I'll have to test this hands-on at a later date to see for sure, as I could only really eyeball this during my time playing. Hogwarts Legacy is another game with some interesting choices in how to utilize the new hardware. Unlike the other titles that seem to favor performance first, Warner Bros. Opted to use PSSR and the improved ray tracing tech to improve the game's fidelity further, bringing it closer to the quality found on the PC version. This means the implementation of ray-traced contact shadows that were not previously made available on PS5, along with improvements to the quality of the ray-traced reflections that bounce off the many marble floors of the castle. There were at least 2 other games on display at the event, Dragon's Dogma 2 by Capcom and F1 24 by Codemasters. Though, for the sake of time, I didn't get around to trying these out personally, and could only see them from a distance. Even still, the stark contrast between the PlayStation 5 Pro running alongside the base PS5 was unmistakable, and it'll definitely offer gamers much more flexibility in regards to running their favorite games at the quality level and performance level that they want. And this is key, as the PlayStation 5 Pro isn't just going to improve the experience of the games that we've already played. The PS5 Pro will undoubtedly be the benchmark moving forward for new titles, with PSSR being a major factor in balancing the fidelity of new games with the higher frame rates we all want to see. So now, the big question. Is PSSR and the extra hardware boost worth that big $699 asking price? I feel if you ask most people, they'd probably say no. But I don't believe the PS5 Pro is really geared towards your average consumer. This is very much an enthusiast-level product, aimed at gamers who want a top-of-the-line gaming machine to go along with their high-end displays. My guess is that the base PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 5 Slim will still be widely supported post-November, and will continue to sell for the foreseeable future as well. But once we start seeing even more graphically intensive titles coming from these first and third-party developers, there's going to be a continued demand for more tactical headroom to drive those experiences. And AI-driven upscaling solutions like PSSR are already proving to be major tools to help facilitate this, as we've seen for the past several years with PC gaming. So yes, $700 is a lot, and considering the lack of a disk drive and vertical stand, I would have anticipated this price to be a bit lower. But there are definitely major benefits to owning this hardware for future PlayStation titles. And, at least for the time being, this is undoubtedly the most powerful home video game console set to hit the market. But what do you guys think? Are you planning on picking up the PlayStation 5 Pro? Let me know in the comments section below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content posted here every week.